Welcome to Box Office Buddies, a podcast where we have a new guest on week after week and in the movie week after week, and we unpack, we review, we laugh about one of their all-time favorite movies. I am Branden Dillard, and I'm joined today by a good friend from back in the day, 2012, back at Summit Middle School. Yes, Soar, Eagles Soar. My boy Caleb Carter. Caleb, will you tell all the Box Office Buddy fans out there who you are, and how we know each other? What do you do? What makes Caleb Caleb?
My name's Caleb Carter. I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. But I met Branden when I went to Summit Middle School. Met him through there, and we just became really good friends. Had a lot of mutual friends, same group of friends that, still talk to this day, man. Shout out 602, shout out Miss Simpson. You hear me? And then, we went to Santa Fe together. And I think what really kind of made me and Branden's relationship grow was when around, I'd say like 7th, 8th grade, I started inviting some friends to church. And every Wednesday they would ride the bus home with me, and then like my mom would cook. We'd have like some fellowship, hoop outside, do homework, etc. Then we go to my church. First it just started out with a couple, and then it just kind of got to the point where we were having to get a church bus to come and pick us up. He was rolling deep. Still remember those days. And it's funny, I was talking to my dad the other day about how you're in the ministry now, and how we talk about how I think the SOS group really touched a lot of people's lives in different ways. And I can just see that faith that was planted at that time, and it's, blossomed into, what you're doing now. And, a lot of us now are still really strong in our faith and stuff. But back to me. Graduated in 2018 with Branden. Then I had started playing tennis like late in high school. It was really just supposed to be a fun activity that I was just going to do to keep me in shape, but I picked it up very fast. I ended up committing to this D2 school located in Cleveland, Ohio area called Tiff University. I went there for 2 years, and I transferred due to COVID. NCAA is a business, whether people want to believe it or not. They started cutting like tennis programs and a bunch of like swing programs, those type of sports. They're like on the lower end of the totem pole, the athletic department. And so the year before prior, we had just won conference. It was like the first time ever. And so I was thinking like, they're not going to cut our program. But then when we came back from our spring break trip in Hilton Head, South Carolina, 3 teams in the Division I top 10 for tennis got cut. University of Minnesota, University of Iowa, I believe, and I forgot the other one. But once that hit, I was like, all right, like I might need a move,
Yeah.
Because even though I was there for, school, athletic and academic scholarships, I primarily went 2,000 miles away from home for sport, So when I came back home during like COVID, I was conversing with my private coach, and he had mentioned how the NAI is a little bit more structured, and to the point where they can't just, sweep the rug from up under you. And so I looked into some NAIA schools, and I ended up committing to Kansas Wesleyan. Funny story, Tyus Jeffries, good friend of ours. He had just committed there like right before COVID, and I guess word on the street got to his coach that I was like looking into it, because they were like wanting me to come. And so they had him doing some undercover recruiting. He's like, hey bro, like come up there with us. Like we can be roommates and stuff. And so I did. And it was a blessing, made a lot of good friends, a lot of good connections. I just loved it. And so I graduated from there in the spring of 2022. With a exercise science degree. Even though I'm not doing exercise science, I was just so tired and burnt out on just like the whole exercise aspect of things. I had did like shadowing with athletic trainers and physical therapists, and I just didn't want to do that because, like for instance, let's say you're a coach, right?
Yeah.
And let's say let's say you're a coach of the Steelers, and let's say, I'm a physical therapist, and George Pickens, he been out for 3 weeks, but he walking around, he kind of playing with the guys, and you're like, hey, Caleb, like, why ain't he playing?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, he's still technically hurt, even though it looks like he's okay. He's still liable. If he goes on the field, he get injured. And so there could be a lot of complications, and you might be mad, and you like, well, just throw him out there. I'm like, all right, if I throw him out there and then he ends up getting hurt, now I'm liable, not you. I lose my job, potentially my license, and I'm just like, I don't want to deal with that. And so I just kind of put it in God's hands, and I just started working, and I ended up really getting into IT. And so I started working in IT about 2 years ago, and currently right now I'm working in the IT department at Boeing. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, man, what a cool story. And man, I love, just how you hit on the sports side of it, and we'll get into that as the episode goes along. One thing you didn't mention about our time on Wednesdays, or our not even on Wednesdays, but our hoop sessions outside your house.
Oh yeah, bro, those hoop sessions were crazy. I promise you, if you graduate between the years of 2017 and 2019, and you played on a varsity team in the Edmond area, you came to my house, 16716 Parkhurst Road.
Yeah.
So I remember one day it was really deep. I was like, this is pretty much the Edmond Open tournament, because we had like 4 dudes from the Memorial team, like not just like random dudes. It was like Drew Tennille, his last name was like Youngblood, and then a couple of like the North guys were there, and then Zach Trethaway, obviously he was playing varsity for Deer Creek, and then like we were from Santa Fe, there's a bunch of Santa Fe guys from there. There's like Jamal, Ben, TK, Tyus, a bunch of guys, and it was competitive. It was really competitive, and but those times were really, really fun, and I miss those, because it was just like, it was just really perfect, because like my neighbors, they were very chill with us being there, because we would be like parked so deep in the cul-de-sac and stuff. It would just be like, it'd be kind of chaotic, but it was just like we were also kids. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, it was really cool. So shout out to Zach's parents, Christy and Eric. Shout out to them. They're really chill, and those times they'll always stick with me, because it's just like, those are really fun times. And, just being outside, and like nowadays you drive in neighborhoods, and you're like, do kids even exist nowadays?
No, they're too busy recording podcasts.
Too busy recording podcasts, or like on Roblox, or just saying whatever into the mic during Fortnite battles and all that. So it's just like, man, like kids nowadays just go out and touch some grass every now and then.
Yeah, no, that's good. And last question before we hop into the movie. Bias aside, Memorial, Santa Fe, or North, who had the best line of hoopers through our time there from 14 to 18?
Santa Fe, for sure.
Yeah.
That first year, our freshman year?
Yeah, we went to,
Tyus' older brother, Daquan. Before Kern Scott transferred. I think he transferred maybe our freshman year, but he was there before at one point. Trey Evans was there at one point. Our freshman year, we had like Deron Mims too. Not just boys, but girls too. Yeah. The Cooper twins, the Cooper twins was nasty. And, Coach Bass was doing his thing still. And, our freshman and senior year, they went to state. Yeah. So, that just tells you alone that I think we were just better as far as, like, talent-wise. But I just think that, in all sports, regardless of the level, when it comes to getting to that road of the championship and, converting when you get to the championship, it's all, like, skill and preparation, but there is a good amount of luck, too, that goes into it. Yeah. Like, who might just be playing better that day.
Or a foot on the line.
Literally anything. Like, because, we lost to PC North our senior year, and EC North was never really that good until like, you know, our junior, senior year. And so I think it all was just like those little factors that played into the part where we never really were able to get a championship during our 4 years there. But overall skill, I think it was definitely Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, without a doubt. I mean, Camden was a dog.
Yeah.
Camden was a dog, and like, I mean, if he wouldn't have gotten hurt in college, he would for sure be playing overseas right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, shout out Camden Gibson.
Come on, hope he listens.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So talking about basketball, and we're segueing into a basketball movie. Glory Road is what we are reviewing today, and came out in 2006. But Caleb, I want you to kind of explain Glory Road to someone who's never seen it before. What's the story about?
So Glory Road is about a girls basketball coach that took on a Division I head coach job at the school that's now called University of Texas El Paso. But at the time, it was called Texas Western. The coach name was Don Haskins, and he took on the job, and he ended up living in the dorm because the job, it didn't have much funding. The school was primarily focused in on football, and so the basketball budget was very, very limited. Now the AD, he was like, I want you to live in the dorms, and he said he was going to have to recruit himself. And so Don Haskins, he was like, all right, I'm a recruit. And so the first initial practices, they saw who they had, and I'm just keep it real. There were no people of color on the team.
Yeah.
There might have been one, but he was like Hispanic.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was Hispanic until he opened his mouth.
Yeah.
And so they had went to this college basketball exposure camp, and they were like, he was with an assistant coach, two assistant coaches, and they were going down the line. And as they were pointing out players, the common denominators of the players they were pointing out, one, they weren't people of color, and then two, they were players that were not even going to be interested in coming to Texas Western. A lot of these players, they were getting recruited by blue bloods such as Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, those type of schools. And so he'd go up to them, introduce himself, and they'd be like, Texas Western? He's like, I haven't heard of that. They're like, I'm not coming there.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, like they don't want to play. I'll go find some people that do want to play. And, he actually found people of color. And so the reason why this movie has such significance is because in 1966, when they went to the March Madness tournament, they beat Kentucky with the first.
You're just going to spoil it like that?
I guess.
Keep going.
I mean, there's more stuff to it. There's more to it. They beat Kentucky with the first all-black starting five. Yeah. And, I'll go into some more depth about who was on that team because there's people now that are still relevant in basketball that were on that team, but I ain't going to say. So, still got to watch, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. My first question would you say movies like this are helpful or harmful? And I say that with just some context of like, you see these movies and you kind of see the history of what Black people have been through.
Right.
And in some ways it's very intense. Like if you watch this movie, you're going to see things, you're going to hear things that you don't often hear. And sometimes it can cause in Black people or anyone really just like a sense of like anger and like, man, I can't believe that this is how we were treated, things like that. And so in some ways it could lead to people maybe overcorrecting of like, oh man, like white people are the worst and like all these things. And so in some ways it could be harmful, but in other ways it's really helpful for people to know and understand that, like you said, this was only 1966.
Which is crazy. Like my mom was born in 71. And so it's like, wow, okay, that's still pretty fresh. And so like we shouldn't ignore these things. But what do you think? You think
helpful, harmful, in between? Where you at when it comes to movies like this? Because I also think I remember the Titans. I think of other things that just showed the history of what people have been through, people of color in particular.
Right. I think it's primarily helpful, but I think it can also be harmful in the aspect of what you said. It ignites like that anger and that fuel in people. And so like a lot of people, especially people that look like me and you, they'll watch a movie like this and like they'll go out, they'll probably go to places that they usually been and they'll see someone that doesn't look like me or you and they'll just kind of give them that side eye. They be like,
Yeah.
you one of them ones.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I think it's primarily helpful on the fact that it just sheds light on like what you said. That wasn't very long ago. That wasn't even 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just also think it's helpful. Like it's always good to be educated and knowledgeable and just aware of things like that because you can tie it into things that happen today and just things that have also happened in the past, and it all correlates because it's history and history repeats itself.
Yeah. Those who don't learn from history.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, like I said, people don't educate themselves, but, that's another story for another day. I'm here to talk about the movie, but I just think it's helpful, bro, because like it makes people realize like how things were back in the day. And I think also from a standpoint of someone that might not be a person of color, it might help them to be more aware of things that they might be saying or things that they might be doing that they didn't necessarily mean out of spite or harm, but they're like, okay, I don't think that really is right to say or, to act towards that person, even if they didn't mean any foul by it, it's just bringing that awareness, like I was saying. And so I think it's just helpful. It helps everyone, not just, people like me and you where we're learning like history like that, but I think it just helps the general population to just be knowledgeable, and it can change a lot of different aspects of how you think, act, and just look at things. So I just think movies like this, Remember the Titans, there's a bunch of other movies too. I just think that this is very, very like beneficial, and I think people should start looking into more movies like this because I don't know about you, but me, when I like watch a movie like this and then they tell you at the end like, oh, this is a real story.
Yeah.
Like I'm not the type of person where I'll watch a movie and I'll read a book about it. This was like the one movie that I watched the movie and I read the book.
Yeah.
This is like the one movie. And the book, people are like, oh my gosh, the book is just as good, if not better than the movie. And I see why they say that. But for me, like that was true to like, about the book being better than the movie. And to me, I thought the movie was really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple things on that, kind of what you said. The first thing about people saying things and not really knowing what they're saying or coming across. I think of that scene. They were outside of the party. I forgot. It was I think it was Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking to the black guys and he was like, so you guys like being called colored or black? And like, It was just like this kind of funny moment of like, I have no idea. And like, I've been saying like colored for so long and you guys don't like that. And it's like, we're black. So call, like say we're black. And it was even a cool moment at the end. Like he referenced that, and it's like, yeah, just knowing just changes things. And you may say things that you think are right, and just being open to correction, things like that. But one thing, another thing on that is, we mentioned Remember the Titans, and that's probably one of the most like iconic movies when it comes to racial reconciliation in sports.
Right.
They showed it a lot in school growing up. Never, at least I don't remember them ever showing Glory Road. Do you think that there's like a reason this movie's a bit more intense, I would say, than Remember the Titans in some ways?
Yes, very much so. I mean, just to put in perspective, Neville Shed, they were in a restaurant on the way back from a road trip. This is when they were starting to gain traction, and it was getting to the point where Don Haskins' wife, when he got back from said road trip, she was distraught and disgruntled on the bed. And he was like, what's wrong, baby? And she was reading off death threats. Yeah. People were talking about him. People were talking about his players. as you can imagine, saying racial slurs and things of that nature. And it just kind of, like I was saying, like history repeats itself.
Yeah.
Like sometimes when you see people of color succeeding, and gaining too much, I guess, leverage or power. Like, for instance, I can only imagine the type of letters President Obama got when he was in office, especially like that second term, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like I said, history repeats itself. And so, I just definitely think it was a little bit too intense. I think Mr. Boone would have showed it if he could. He definitely would have. Shout out Mr. Boone, because that's where a lot of my love for history came from, because he is like a true American in my eyes. When I mean a true American, like regardless of color, of race, or how you might look, woman, boy, or girl, he highlights history and he talks about the significance of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I always respected him about Mr. Boone. And he was always like a really good teacher and stuff.
Yeah.
And even though people might have said, like, they might have thought he was like a racist, or like just because he might have been Republican, whatever the case might be, I never saw or really listened to that, because I like to get my own opinion on people. And Mr. Boone was a very respectable guy. And as long as you respected him, he would respect you. And that's all you can really ask for out of people. But no, it was too intense. Neville Shedd, he got jumped by 3 guys in the bathroom, came out bloody nose. Like, bro, they're not about to do that. I mean, no, they weren't going to show that. And so it was just too intense for sure. I think especially for at least our public school system, they weren't about to show that.
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep it a bean. They're not about to show that.
Yeah. And then kind of my last question on that is, you mentioned you went back and you read the book. How accurate is the book to the movie? And also, how accurate is it to history itself?
The book is very accurate. Obviously, since it's a true story, the book has a little bit more detail into it. Yeah. And just on the fact that it is a book, it's going to be more detailed. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so there are a little bit more details that are in the book that weren't in the movie. But like I said, it's a movie and a book. So, like, one is action and the other is words. So it's, even though it might have seen more detail, I think the book and the movie were pretty comparable. Yeah. And as far as history wise, it was spot on. Yeah. Yeah.
So how'd you first discover it, the movie? And if they weren't showing it in the public schools, like when do you remember like first sitting down and watching it?
Obviously, my parents. No, Reverend Carter.
He kicked me out of his house at 6 a.m. on your birthday. Yeah,
that was my sister's fault. We couldn't have nothing. Yeah. Anyways, so they were very, even though I went to Edmond Public Schools, one thing about my parents that a lot of people don't know is that my parents didn't grow up in the suburbs by any means. A lot of my family members, and including my parents, are either from and still reside to this day in like South Texas or South Dallas. And those are obviously some rough areas. My dad, even when he moved to Oklahoma City, he grew up in Musgrave.
Justin Parker.
Yeah, the grave. He grew up in the grave. Yeah. So he's definitely not from Edmond. Yeah. Even though he wears a suit everywhere. He assimilated himself, I guess. Yeah. And but yeah, they were always very, they always harped on me knowing who I am, and also knowing the history of like not just where I come from, but also being an African American, because being in America and then just also being like in Edmond, and I also played tennis, you can forget who you are really fast if you don't really, educate yourself and are also aware. Like, growing up, I still talk with like Justin and like some other people, I would go to school in Edmond and I laid my head down in Edmond. But if I wanted to get a haircut, if I wanted to go, do outside activities, like if I wanted to go to Little League football or just AU, get some like real food that I couldn't get over here, I'm going like to the inner city, east side. Like there were probably like for sure 4 days out of the week, I'm going over to the east side.
Yeah.
And so I think that also just helped with me navigating through life and just being able to adapt and also know what's right and what's wrong in different environments.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of like people of color nowadays, they'll like get into some sort of environments. And I'm not saying you have to change who you are, but you also have to conduct yourself in a proper manner.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'd say I'm pretty good at code switching, if you know what that means, you know what I'm saying? And so like, my parents, they would always show me a lot of different historical like movies. Like my dad, he showed me Roots.
I feel like I saw Roots in school though. So
no, you didn't. You definitely didn't.
You sure?
I'm
with
positive.
With Kunta?
Toby. Definitely did it, man. Yeah, he showed me Roots. He would always, take me over to the east side and stuff. And it was just from my parents. But like if you didn't really truly know me, even like, I mean, this is probably news to you, but like a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Like my parents came from the hood. You would never know that. And the way they conduct themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was just from my family, and then like, just being around my other family as well. I just always had like a strong sense of knowing who I am. And that's why like my sisters, for example, like Taylor, she's a general surgeon and she went to a school, a fast track med school program. But to this day, I'd say she's probably the strongest person I know.
Yeah.
Because, I forgot who it was, but someone had just basically had said, they talked about like black female doctors as if they were like, a nobody.
Yeah.
And that's very significant. One, being a doctor in general is just a like spectacular achievement.
Yeah.
But also doing it as a woman and a person of color as a cherry on top, that's like astronomical. Not a lot of people can say that. Yeah. And she's a general surgeon. She would always tell me, like when she would be in the hospital sometimes, people would think she's like a nurse or someone that works in the front desk. And they'd ask her, where's this at? And she's very blunt. And so a lot of times she'd be like, I don't know where that is. She's like, I have a surgery to go conduct. Yeah. And then she can get off the elevator. Yeah. But yeah, so that's where it all really assimilates from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's good. I think, man, my story's a little different, but similar in some ways. I grew up in Norman and then, moved to Edmond a little bit later. And those are just predominantly places with just white. And I think it felt like internally, I just felt like uncomfortable, like watching these things because I just felt more and more different. And I was like, I would much rather just kind of fit in and just not feel like a minority and just kind of act like everything's all, peachy and clean. And it wasn't probably until later on in life where I started to kind of see like, oh no, like it's good to like know these things and like be proud of who you are and be proud of those who like came before you. But yeah, I'd never seen like Glory Road. I remember like when you texted me, like I looked up the trailer and I was like, I feel like I've seen this trailer before in like other Disney movies that like I'd own. Like, is it coming this fall? Glory Road. But I never sat down and watched it. But I love Remember the Titans. Great movie. But I think this movie is unique in how intense it is with the language, the actions, things like that. But yeah, I was never super comfortable like knowing and seeing these things of like, wow, this is like the person that I can relate to the most on the screen is like being treated this way.
Right.
And it's like growing up in Norman and Edmond, like all your closest friends are going to be white just because of just the numbers.
Right.
And so it's like, oh man, so like if that's who I relate to, like who do they relate to in this story? And I was even talking to my mom and my uncle yesterday about how sometimes like in schools, like when there are talks about like slavery or like MLK Day comes around.
Looking at you.
Look at you.
Like, bro, I remember in the 3rd grade, I think one girl, she was sitting next to me because, you know, like sometimes they'd form the desk in a way.
Yeah.
Bro, we were like 9 years old. What, you were like 9, 10 in the 3rd grade? Girl proceeds to like turn over, like she was like looking at the screen. Yeah. And then like I was behind her, and so she like turns around and she pats me on the back and she says, "I'm sorry." Yeah, I'm just like, it's stuff like that. What you're saying is like, how do I like, you feel different like when that happens, because you're already like, you're in a school where, you know, there's probably like what I don't know, you're the minority. That's all that really matters. And then you're in a class, so you're like the minority times 2. There might be like 3 others, you know, that look like you. And, you know, when you go through like that sort of time, especially like Black History Month, and they'll like play something and people just like look at you, especially like I got super uncomfortable like whenever they would say like the hard R in something that I would watch, and people would just automatically look at me like, like regardless if they meant like any harm to it, is like, you know, what I was saying. It's just like, why would you like look at me? It's just kind of like they were trying to look at my reaction. Like, obviously that's not going to sit well with me, because like, you know, that's like my history. You know what I'm saying? And what am I supposed to be like? Oh yeah, yippee, we came from that, you know? Yeah,
but I'm also not going to flip a table.
Exactly. like I don't know what you're expecting me to do. Like crash out, or be like throw my chair at the smart board. Like, I don't know what you're expecting. So yeah, bro, I definitely can agree with that. You just feel different. But as you get older and you get more confident in who you are, and you realize who you are, and when there's power in knowing who you are, you start to assimilate more with where you came from, and you want to know more, not only about, you know, where you came from, but you also start to learn more about yourself. Yeah. So yeah,
man, it's good. And so you gave me a list of about 5 movies that you were trying to decipher through. Why did you end up going with this one versus the others? You didn't have to go into what the others were, but like, why is this one of your favorites?
This one is because, like I said, I read the book, and also, you know, I've been looking at the other episodes that you've done for the podcast. Yeah. And this is like one of the first, not only, you know, historical movies for the podcast, but let alone true stories. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I was like, you know, I just wanted to be different. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being different. Mm-hmm. And also I just wanted to also bring a little bit different type of like content to your pod. Yeah. So it was just like, I just thought it'd be like beneficial, not just for you, but for the people watching. Yeah, maybe even a new viewership. Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Hey, but you're a fan of the show. Let me give you this Box Office Buddy stickers. Check us out. There you go. It's for you. What do you think? Do I get like a free movie with it, or we'll show it to them? We'll get you a free movie. Yeah. Just promote us. I got you. But yeah, let's talk about the story element of it. The plot, you know, I think it's unique mainly because it's a true story, and so you want to stay as true to history as possible. I had a couple of grievances with the movie that you can maybe shed some light on as we can kind of work through it. But in the first bit of it, I just felt like there wasn't a lot of direction. Before the season started, I just felt like a lot of just random things were happening. And like, once again, this is a true story, and so this is just like documenting their life. But it just felt like we would just jump between scenes, and there would be like no lead up. No flow. There's no flow to before the season starts. Well, that's kind of the whole point of the movie and what happened, because like I had said, the dean just gave him this job, said
Yeah.
you're going to be living in the dorms because we don't have enough money to provide housing. So if they don't have money to provide housing for him, they definitely didn't have money for him to recruit. And so there's like different spots here and there. So you got to think about it. It also sheds light on how recruiting is in the college sports, is because there's not just flow. You're always on the go. You're always in different spots. So, you know, it always showed like one of the scenes, the younger assistant coach
In New York.
he went to South Bronx. He said, I'm looking for 3 colored players by the name of I'll read their names because I remember where they're from. He was like, Neville Shedd, Willie Cager, and Willie Worsley. Now, mind you, he's at basically like, in essence, a Rutgers Park type of environment, which aren't a lot of. He was really the only person there, and he was at night.
Yeah,
they all stopped. It was like one of them said, "Did he say colors?" They said, "Yeah," and he ain't talking about the TV either, bro. They stripped him clean.
Yeah.
And so the next scene, it shows he's calling Don Haskins. He's like, "Yeah, I got him." He said they'll be there in a week, but he's like, "Can you also wire me $100?" And then it shows like the whole you know, from a zoomed out perspective, he was just in a shirt and his drawers and his shoes. They stripped him clean.
Yeah.
When he read off the names, he had a briefcase, he had a suit, a tie, like a watch, bro.
Yeah.
They stripped him. It was a good learning lesson for him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then Don Haskins, when he pulled up on I forgot which one it was. It was one, he was in Gary, Indiana. It was Harry Flournoy.
Mm-hmm.
He had just got done on his shift at the warehouse.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk a little bit of perspective on this. And so at that time, a lot of African Americans, they were not getting scholarships, let alone recruited. And so the next thing that they were usually going to after high school was just straight to work. And so he had already started working by this time.
Yeah.
And the coach was pulling up on him, and he looked at his buddy with his lunch pail. He said, "Run." Now, mind you, they're like 20.
Yeah.
And they're running because there are 2, white Americans that are just pulling up on him. And
it's kind of creepy.
When that happens, it usually means trouble.
Yeah.
And so they ran, and he comes in, and he's like, "Mama, you wouldn't believe these 2 white dudes pulled up on me." And he's like, "Man, I've been looking for that pie." He turned around the corner into his living room. Coach Haskins is in the living room talking about, "Man, I love this pie." Man, he was so shocked. I just thought that was funny because it also just sheds light on, like, as far as recruiting aspect for coaches, they will do whatever it takes to get a player that they want.
Yeah.
Like one coach that was like that was Nick Saban. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, if y'all watch Alabama and y'all see the type of players that Alabama has, Nick Saban had to go in the trenches to get a lot of those players.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was watching like a kind of like it was like a little show, and it was talking about recruiting, and it was about SEC coaches, and they were talking about like the best food they had.
Yeah.
And all the food that they talked about was like, I remember Gus Miles, he's like, "Oh yeah, I went to Mississippi and I had me some oxtails." And you know, he's like I said, he's going in the trenches. And I remember I watched a video on social media. Nick Saban was doing the Cupid Shuffle in some small little house in the living room, and he had rhythm and all that. And you know, it's like it really relates to like Don Haskins, is because those parents, they're sending their kids off. Nowadays, and, obviously they didn't have to deal with as far as like the segregation and all that, but they're still sending their kids off, and they sending them with a random person. They have to be comfortable with that. Yeah. And at that time, it was harder because they're not only sending their kids off across the country with a random man, but they're also sending them into the South. Yeah. So like, I need to know that like my baby isn't going to be lynched or whatever. Like he's going to be taken care of. Yeah. And he made sure, and the fact that he was able to get those people to be comfortable with him is very significant. Yeah.
One of my questions, how much of a factor does recruiting play today with the whole NIL thing? Like, does it matter how well you can recruit or how much you can pay? or a little bit of both?
I would say a little bit of both, because if you look at college basketball, and I love these coaches, guys like Tom Izzo, Rick Pitino, especially Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino, in an essence, I think he's like the LeBron of coaching, because he's always went to a team that was not very good, but within 2 years they're competing.
Yeah.
Like, not just competing in the league, but competing nationally. And like St. John's hasn't been good since like Chris Mullins was there.
Yeah.
And Chris Mullins was on the dream team. So just to put in perspective how long ago that was, they were the number 2 seed going into the tournament this year. Now, even though they lost to an 8 seed Arkansas team, I think the seeding is very botched, because that Arkansas team is on paper not an 8 seed.
Yeah.
And they've been, battling injuries. But but also on the contrary, money is a big thing too, because BYU, they're talking about how, like, so they had just signed the number 1 player, AJ Desponte or whatever, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he went to a school called Utah Prep. Now, this school had only been established for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And there are like 3 players from BYU that went to Utah Prep. Not a coincidence.
Yeah.
Now, there's a guy from Baylor. He played on Baylor's team. He had broke like the assist records as a freshman and stuff like that. He was planning on coming back to Baylor, and he was already getting $1 million for the NIL. And I think BYU threw him like $3 or $4 million.
Wow.
They're like, if you come play with us in the same conference, we're gonna throw you like another $3-4 million.
Yeah.
And so there's money in it for sure. And like, I don't think people realize how deep the pockets can really go. It's not like when people hear about like NIL, they're like, oh, it's just from the boosters and alumni. Yeah, it might be from the alumni, but like, for instance, the CEO of Body Armor went to St. John's. St. John's, their whole team was nothing but transfers. Do you think just Rick Pitino sold them all like, oh, yeah, I'm going to show you discipline, even though they call him like the Godfather, you know? They're like, oh, yeah, like I'm from New York, woo-woo. No, like he got some funding from that.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with BYU. Like, if you have alumni that are willing to invest into the program, and they like, if they're sports fanatics, that's an upper hand.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like interesting to see though, like, for instance, Tom Izzo. I mean, Draymond Green alone could easily throw 10 mil and get some really good players up there. But I think it's also that Tom Izzo, like, the reason why I respect him is he doesn't want his program to be run by money or outside factors. He wants it to keep it the same. Yes, he realizes that, okay, I'm going to have to pay these players, because if not, they're going to go somewhere else. But he also still runs it the Tom Izzo way. Yeah. And I respect that a lot. And so I think it's a little bit of both. But I'd say primarily it's ran by money, because not a lot of people know Walter Clayton Jr. actually played for Rick Pitino at Iona, and he was supposed to go to St. John's, but on the fact that Florida threw him a bigger check, ended up going to Florida.
National champion.
Yep.
And that's good. What as we get back to the story side of it, favorite scenes, scenes that kind of mean the most to you, scenes that were done really well, what would you say?
I think the scenes leading up to the season were very, very, very good, because Don Haskins, he always harped on, he wasn't looking at color, he was looking at skill. And also during that recruiting process, he showed one of the guys a move. He's like, if he can get past me, then you don't have to come. But he was like pushing them and stuff, because he was also getting them prepared. It was foreshadowing for the movie, is getting prepared. The refs weren't going to call fouls for them. So they had to be tough. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So he was like pushing them. He's like, oh, you weak and all this. And, like when you're like challenging another man, especially in a capacity that he has a passion for, that's going to ignite a fuel in the fire.
Like Neville.
Yeah, like Neville. And Neville came out there with an umpire mask on, had tissue in his nose, and the nose was red. You would have thought it would just been red nose plugs, and then Willie Cager, he had a heart condition.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny. It was like kind of a pun because he was such a hard worker, such a hustler. He said, my heart's too big. And he had let me see, what's it called? Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, something like that.
Yeah.
Basically, the heart muscles are too big. And so if you like do too much exercise and, like the heart regulates the blood throughout the body, it can kind of constrict the blood. And so that's why a couple times when he would be running and hustling and all that, he dying for loose balls, he'll stop momentarily because like his heart would start to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I thought he was going to die. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the very end, and man, I think one of my favorite scenes has to be when his mom like went back there and talked to him. Because, I mean, for reference, I was watching a video about the Steelers, and Ryan Clark had a heart issue, and him and Mike Tomlin were talking, and Tomlin was like, hey, if you were my kid, we wouldn't even have this conversation. And so it's just really cool to see, like, Haskins take the role of, like, hey, I'm not risking it. Like, it is just a game. But to see his mom go back there and say, like, just please let him play. And honestly thought at the end, like, he was going to die, but I'm thankfully, I mean, he didn't. Obviously, he came really good player. But I'm trying to remember. So, yeah, favorite scenes. Yeah, leading up. So, my only thing about the whole leading up is, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of flow. But I think the fact that it was just kind of all over the place was a really good thing because they didn't have a lot of money. But I can't get past some of the scenes where, for instance, when he was talking to his big guy from Houston, what's his name?
They called him Big Daddy D. David Lattin from Houston, H-Town.
Yeah, when he was talking to that girl on the phone in his room, and then one of the guys, it might have been Neville actually.
It was Neville.
Yeah, it was at the door.
Being nosy.
Yeah, and it just felt like some of those things were just kind of like.
But I think that was plan of the producers of the movie because it's so chaotic, so botched. But as they start winning, what happens in the movie? It starts flowing.
Yeah, more uniform.
And as they become together,
it
starts flowing better. So I think that was the whole like underlying, what the producer wanted to see was like, okay, like the beginning it's all chaotic, they're having like a little 5-on-5 basketball game in the lunchroom. Neville Shed's getting jumped, and then like it's those like, and then Bobby Joe Hill, he's coming to the games drunk. Don Haskins is getting on to him, but like even though there's all these like discrepancies happening and they start to form a bond and they start to believe, and then that's when everything just starts kind of flowing. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so I think that was just all part of the plan of like the movie, honestly.
Yeah, no, man, that's good. What about, let's talk about the characters, kind of the heartbeat of stories, movies, etc. And who's your favorite character? As I was watching, I told you off the mic, you remind me of a certain Willie. But man, what do you see when it comes to these characters? What are their motivations? How they grow? Just what are the role they play in the story for you?
I really like Bobby Joe Hill because he was the most. He was kind of like the bull of the group.
Yeah,
he was very hard headed, stubborn. Yeah, wanted to do things his own way. And so he also was the point guard. And I liked him a lot because I think the fact that the coach was the hardest on him was also preparing him for that national championship run, because as a point guard, you have to be the leader. You have to be the floor general. Usually that's the person that's the on-court coach. Yeah. So he's like, if you're going to be like the point guard and all this, he's like, you're going to have to cut all this out. Yeah. And it wasn't even about him being the point guard. He was more getting onto him because he's like, you're wasting your talent. Yeah. Regardless of the skill he played or the position he played, he was like, you're wasting your talent. And he just instilled that belief. When Coach Haskins approached him after that college basketball exposure camp. He was ready to quit, and he was like, "I'm ready to offer you a full ride to play Division I." He was like, "What are you smoking?"
Yeah.
And he was like, because literally during that college basketball exposure camp, when they first shown the camera on him, he had his head down. He's at the end of the bench, and the coaches were basically not playing him because of the color of his skin, even though the few minutes he went out there,
he got busy.
Hey, tween, spin, lay, like he was, and then acting like he was jogging back down half court, turns around, steals the ball, does like a Jamal Crawford behind the back move, lay again in the first minute that he's in. So obviously, and then he had talent, and he knew that. And I think what really something that you might have missed that really stuck with me was he was like, "Oh, I think I'm about to quit. I'm just be like, the next Smokey Robinson or the next president."
Yeah.
He said, "It's like me playing music and it's good, but you don't want to hear it." Mm-hmm. And he was basically saying like him playing basketball was like in essence the same because he was good at basketball, but just because of the color of the skin, people didn't want to see him playing. And like I had said, he was at the end of the bench with his head down, and he wasn't getting any PT because of the color of his skin.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a good line. I think my favorite line from him was the national championship game where they were talking. I don't know if it was it wasn't Pat. It was the one black guy they had.
I forgot. I think.
But they were just saying he was the best point guard in the country.
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, I would take you." And he was like, "Well, you're right," because he wouldn't have took me. And so that was really cool at the end. That boy could play, though. That might have been the semi game, actually.
Yeah, it was KU.
Yeah.
It was a semi game. And you know what's funny? So there are two scenes. So that scene and then a scene at the beginning when they had the kind of like 5-on-5 basketball game.
Yeah.
Those two scenes are very, very similar to other movies. I forgot the movie, what it's called, but it's basically about when Bear Bryant signed the first black player to Alabama. So the prior year, this was like in 1970. So this is later than this. Yeah. And in football, in the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, there were no people like me or you suiting up.
Yeah.
And Bear Bryant, he started like catching on, and he saw USC. USC at this time, they had African-American players, and they were fully integrated, and they were good. And I believe they had won like the national championship around this time. And, in Alabama, they're like, "Oh, we don't want those people suiting up for Roll Tide," you know what I'm saying, for the Crimson. And Bear Bryant was like, "Okay, y'all don't want them suiting up. I'ma, show you why they should be suiting up." So Bear Bryant scheduled in 1970 for USC to come and play Alabama at Alabama, beat them 42-21, and everybody's like, "Okay, I think we can have a couple." And then, you know what I'm saying? And then that's when they signed their first player. And then the 5-on-5 basketball little cafeteria game that they had, it reminded me of Remember the Titans. So Gary Bertier, and he reminds me of Gary Armstrong because he stood up. He said, "Starting forward." Right.
Yeah.
And then Harry Florner reminded me of Julius Campbell. Because Harry Florner said, "Nah, I'm the starting forward."
Yeah.
And then you remember the Titans, they're like, "Left side,
strong side." Yeah.
And like, it was just cool to see that. And I was just thinking about that. And it was really, really funny because Gary Bertier and then Gary Armstrong have the same first name. And then like, and it was just like little things like that I was just like picking up on and just kind of connecting. I just thought it was really cool.
Yeah. Would you mind pushing that back? Yeah, man. No, that's good. What about, obviously, there's a long list, but like least favorite character or even some character that you've come to appreciate more as time has gone on?
Are you like referring to just like the players or just any character in the movie?
Yeah, I'll say any character in the movie.
The athletic department, the athletic director. Wade. Regardless, even though they had started winning, he didn't like the fact that there were people of color representing his athletic department. And I mean, towards the end, he gave Haskins his flowers, but like something that really, really stuck with me in the movie was when he said there's 7 of them. They were watching the practice.
Yeah, there's 12.
And then
there's 12 of them.
I guess it was like assistant athletic director was like, there's 12 of them. He said, well, there's 7 of the others. And then when they were watching the basketball game, they had already won like a couple games by now. He said, when did this start becoming a school of color? We look like the Tuskegee Airmen. Yeah. And that he was referring, if you've seen the movie Red Tails. Yeah. Yeah, bro. It's a lot of stuff that like correlates with other, not only movies, but just things in history. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people, it's just going to like fly over a lot of people's heads because they're just, like I said, not educated. Yeah. And I just think a lot of media nowadays, and obviously you can see like with stuff going on politically, I'm not going to go into politics. But like, they're trying to basically strip like the educational like department budget. And not even on the standpoint of like people are going to miss out on history, but like books that we grew up on. Like I spark noted a lot of books, but I loved Of Mice and Men. Long live Lenny. They ain't gonna be able to see. They ain't gonna be able to see Lenny speak about his dream tending to the alfalfa and rabbits because they wanna take all those books out and stuff. And it's not even about just the racial history. It's just about stuff that we grew up on that like our kids, they're gonna be like, what is that? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, it just kind of sucks seeing stuff like that happen. Yeah. Stripped away.
No, for sure. I think, I think my favorite character, I really did like Neville Shedd. He had a powerful moment when Coach literally walked into, I thought he was joking because Coach he had moments where it's like, what are you saying right now? And like, what are you trying to do? But in that moment when he walked into Neville's room, started taking everything out and was like, you're going home. And I was like, oh, he's just trying to motivate him. Yeah. But then when he had the ticket, he said, like, get out of here. And I was like, oh, dang, like Coach is serious. And to see Neville go to the gym and just kind of be distraught. And he had that really sweet moment where he was like, and the crowd's going crazy, and he was shooting the rounds, and he was like, I'm not leaving. Yeah. Like, and that was, it just felt very Remember the Titans of like, hey, like I'm here to stay. Yeah.
He had like an epiphany because he realized I got a opportunity to play Division I basketball, not just basketball, but he got a scholarship to play Division I basketball. And he's like, I think what he was probably thinking was like, there are a ton of other guys, even cats from his own neighborhood, that would have killed to have that opportunity. And he was basically taking it for granted. And that's why he came back that next scene with the umpire mask on. And he didn't want to go get checked out by the doctor because he's like, even if I die, I can say that I fulfilled my dream. And that he beat the statistics, So I think it was just that part, and I think a lot of them were not just doing it for themselves, but they were doing it for other people that look like us. Yeah.
I was gonna say, man, another one of the really cool scenes is when the few black people at the University of Kentucky were like sneaking away to watch it.
They say, yeah.
It's bigger than them. Right. It's for a nation. It's for people who are going to grow up. And I think there's something really powerful about seeing someone who looks like you and being like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. Right. And it's like, man, that's empowering. And that's really cool.
And what's funny was when people had like found out that I committed to play tennis, a lot of people that I was cool with, I was cool with, but never really necessarily had conversations with, they had came up and congratulated me. Yeah. And I just think it was moments like that And like when people would hear I'd play tennis, especially like the collegiate level, and also I was successful at that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A lot of people, they're like, you know what? Like, yeah, they felt like a little bit empowering. They got encouragement, and they just thought that was like the coolest thing. And they would always like want to learn more and stuff like that. And yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Yeah. And so like I could relate to that in some aspect because, you know, when I started playing tennis, I was going to like Oak Tree and the Greens. Yeah. And, you know, I'm going to keep it real. I was the only one out there. Yeah. And a lot of people, they would like look at me. Mm-hmm. They'd kind of look at me as if I was lost, like if I was in the right area. Yeah. But, you know, people also just started talking to me once they saw me play. They're like, okay, like he can actually play. Mm-hmm. But I also gained a lot of good friends to this day that I'm still really good friends with that kind of helped me during that time. Yeah. That befriended me because, like, when I go to, like, tournaments and stuff, I wouldn't be talking to people and stuff like that, you know. And one of my really good friends now, his name's Chris Dyer. He was one of those guys. Like, he came up to me. The first thing he said, it was my junior year, and he was a sophomore. And he went to Memorial. He came up to me. He was like, it was like right when Kendrick Lamar's album Damn came out. Yeah. He's like, bro, have you listened to it? And I was like, I just kind of looked at it. I was like, what? And then, like, he actually, like, really started, like, talking about it and stuff. And then, like, I just realized, you know, he's just trying to, like, start conversation. Yeah. And, like, since then, like, we've been locked in to this day. Yeah. And, like, when he went to OSU and he was in Sig Ep, he would let me, like, stay at the frat house. And, like, that's not, I don't know if I should say that or not. But it's too late. It don't really matter now. Yeah. But, yeah, shout out Sig Ep at OSU, though. A lot of those dudes, they was chill. They're actually chill. So yeah. But yeah, like he would come, he would invite me, like, bro, come up, and I'd stay, and like we just hang out, and I'd kick it with him and like his frat brothers, and it was chill. I'm not gonna lie, like it was cool. But I think just on the fact that he was like willing to do that, you know, because usually people don't even do that for someone that's not a person of color. Just on the fact, like, if you're not in the frat, like you're not allowed to be involved in said activities. But he was just like, nah, like this is my brother, like, you know, he can come and all this, and he always vouch for me and stuff like that. So you know, shout out Chris.
That's what's up. One of my final questions, and we can hop in anything you got on yours, but realistically, how well would this team do today?
That's a good question. Because if you really look at how they play, a lot of them were playing in a way that translate to today's game. Like, I think David Lattin would still be pretty dominant. Yeah. I think Bobby Joe Hill would still be like a good point guard and stuff. And speaking of him, you know, I talked about how the coach, he had made them like tougher, and he realized they weren't getting foul calls. Yeah. That's why a lot of like players, like, you know, growing like back then, like Isaiah Thomas, for instance, he, you know, they played with a little bit more razzle dazzle and a little finesse because they weren't going to get them foul calls. They just, you know, dribbled. You know, they might have did a crossover, got by you, but like they would get fouled and they were going to get that foul call. And it also correlates with soccer. A lot of people don't realize. So I had got into like soccer when I got to college because my roommate was on the soccer team. Yeah. But I like still to this day watch soccer. But like Brazilian soccer and like a lot of players that play with finesse, like Neymar, that originates because back when Pele, if you know who that is, he played with a lot of finesse because he was basically trying to get around defenders because the refs weren't going to give them foul calls. Mm-hmm. And so they had to do all these tricks. That's why Neymar does like the rainbow flick, because they're like, okay, well, if I just try to like, you know, maneuver around them like how a typical soccer player will, they're going to foul me, I'm going to lose the ball, and I ain't going to get the foul call. Yeah. That's why the rainbow flick was like, okay, I'm going to flick the ball over his head. He ain't going to be expecting to, you know, dodge him, you know, juke him out, and then, you know, go to the goal. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I just see stuff like that. And like I said, everything just correlates. Like there's just always that common denominator of, being a person of color in those sports and not getting treated fairly, not just in sports, but in life in general.
Yeah.
And a lot of those players, even Pele and stuff like that, they would travel and, they wouldn't be able to stay in certain places.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the movie 42, but with Jackie Robinson,
yeah,
they're like, oh yeah, he can't eat in here. And then the team was like, all right, then we're not going to eat here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like, it's crazy just seeing all that stuff and seeing like how, even though Pele was like in the, like before then, he was probably like 1940s, 50s, I think.
Yeah.
And then dating to like Jackie Robinson, it's like all the same, but different.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So you think they'd make it past the round of 64?
Yeah, they would. I think they're a Sweet 16 team for sure.
That's fair.
I think for sure. Because, I mean, what's the difference between them and that St. John's team? If you really think about it, they might be better shooters than that St. John's team. I'm not going to lie. That St. John's team, they beat themselves. They missed like a plethora of layups and free throws, but they still only lost by like 7. They could have easily won that game by 7 if they would have just made half their free throws or layups.
Yeah. I hear you. What else you got on your paper?
On my paper, man, I talked about kind of how like the Remember the Titans.
Yeah.
It correlates. Oh, another player during that lunch fight, Togo Riley. He was kind of like the bridge between the black and white. He reminded me of Big Louie in Remember the Titans because they were starting to kind of get tension at the lunch table.
Yeah.
And he was like, yo, I'm Togo Riley. I'm from El Paso.
Yeah.
He's like, what's y'all's names? He
Yeah.
said that to the black people. And then that's when he's the mediator and also the bridge.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of Big Louie because Big Louie, he like soul and all that.
I know you want to leave me.
Yeah. And then he was like, yeah, this is my home dog, Rev. And he was like, he was like really excited to introduce Rev in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And like all the white guys were like, what are you doing? And the black people was like, one of us. You know what I'm saying? They got excited. Yeah. So just to see that. And then I just thought it was kind of like funny how the assistant coach, he had kind of made a joke. He said like, Negroes are going to be the future of basketball and laughed about it. Well.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny, all right.
Yeah.
In fact, probably funny that he didn't think it was gonna be like that. But I think that whole movie just talked about really just overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
And then, we were talking about how they made that run. Here's some more kind of like history that people don't really know about. Obviously they got to the championship and they played Kentucky like I did say, but I didn't tell you who was on that team. On that team was Pat Riley. Pat Riley was a player, and if you don't know Pat Riley, he owns the Heat now. Yeah. It's like the godfather of the NBA. Heat culture. That's Pat Riley. Also won championships with the Lakers. A lot of people don't know that. He was a coach before he got into the management. And then the coach of the Kentucky basketball team was Adolph Rupp. And Kentucky's arena is called what?
Rupp Arena.
Right?
Yeah.
People don't know that, man. So, just shedding a little light on that. And I just really think that was just such a pioneer movie because, like I said, it happened in 1966, but Alabama didn't get their first black player until the early 70s. So once they saw that, and then USC, they started integrating their team and stuff like that. And they're like, you know what? I think like we should integrate our teams and all that. And so I just think that was kind of like a domino effect.
Yeah.
And so I just really think that's like, it was just such a like astronomical and just such a significant movie. just in history.
Yeah.
And like for me too, like, you know, being African American and playing tennis, you know, there's not a lot of us. I think in my whole collegiate career and even high school, even though I played like only 2 years, I probably saw less than 20 African Americans.
Did they think you knew Serena and Venus?
Man, and you know it was funny. It was funny because, like, you know, we had talked about how when, you know, you growing up, they would have like show like Black History like shows or whatever during Black History Month. It was like the same thing in tennis sometimes. Like people would make like kind of jokes. They'd be like, "Oh, you think you can beat him?" or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I was like, well, duh. Like, regardless of who it is, I think I could beat them and stuff like that. And like, I think that's also where like that me like kind of you know, wanting to be different and also like resonating with it and just also not being afraid of being different came from.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I just wanted to be low key, and you know me, like growing up, bro, I was really quiet and stuff like that, and you know, like I wasn't super vocal about stuff or anything like that. But once I started playing tennis, it really kind of ignited like a fuel of like, I'm gonna prove these people wrong.
Yeah.
And just to kind of put things in perspective. So, you know, I played with Omar my first year. And we, you know, when we first started our first tournament, we beat Bishop McGinnis for a 3rd place match. And people were like, oh, okay, you know, it was their day. Yeah. And so a couple tournaments start going by. We start having success. We start catching people's eye. Because me and Omar, we came out of nowhere. A Black dude and a Muslim step on a court. Most times people are like, oh, we got this in the bag. Yeah. We were beating people, like, you know, beating private schools, beating like Tulsa schools, Bixby, Broken Arrow, and things of that nature. And the tennis community is very small here in like Oklahoma. And so you usually know people you're playing before you even get on the court. And so when they see our names, they're like, who is this? Yeah. And then once they really saw us, they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, who? Yeah. And just a quick story, me and Omar, by this time, we, you know, anytime we played, there would be like people watching from the other team. Like not just like players, but parents. Yeah. And it would get intense. I'm not gonna lie. Like it would get intense. Now sometimes it's just out of like, cause it was pure good tennis. Yeah. A lot of times it was because of the fact of what we looked like. And their parents were like, you better not lose to them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So we went to Claremore. We were playing for first place. It was the 2nd set, and it was starting to get close because we had lost the first set. And so we were winning the 2nd set. And sometimes in tennis, you kind of get caught up in the play, and you can't really, you know, you don't have the time to just look like, oh, was that ball truly in? Yeah. And you might just at an instinct call it out because you thought it was out. Yeah. Omar had called a ball out that was in. The parents like started standing up, coming to the gate, sort of thing. Wow. It got to a point where like our coach, he told Zach Dillon to get in the front seat of the car just in case we had to leave. Like it got that serious. Yeah. And like when they all started saying, I was like, no. I was like, it was in. Yeah. And I had like pull Omar aside. I was like, hey, bro. I was like, we gonna get a medal at this point. Like, let's just get home. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And then after that, I had told my parents that, and I think Omar told his parents too. After that, like we always had someone with us at tournaments after that, which is sad because, you know, you have the coach with you. So it's like they're supposed to be your chaperone or whatever. Yeah. But the fact that we actually had to have someone from each designated family just there to see us play high school tennis, just on the fact that because people were getting upset that we were winning, and like also like it was the fact that like, I mean, I did like private lessons. Omar kind of did private lessons, but that was my like first year of tennis. Yeah. And I'm beating these kids that have been playing since they're like 8. Yeah. And then I'm also a person of color. They didn't like that. Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's just crazy to see. But I also just really like, I soaked it in, and I enjoyed stuff like that, because when people are getting mad at you for doing stuff like that, you're like doing good, and like you're well on your way. So it just always motivated me to work more, because like I think that's where like kind of like why I like to troll people now, because I'm just like, sometimes I'd laugh after tournaments. Like I'd turn around and laugh. Like I remember we had played, like, I forgot who it was. I think it was like Deer Creek or Norman North or something. But I like turned around to the parents and laughed and put a thumbs down. Well, I was just like, I mean, I mean, like, in like respect though, they were like talking noise.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've heard some stuff before, man, for sure. So yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, man. Well, man, thank you for your time, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it,
man. I feel like you provided some real insight as a black man who has played in a sport that's predominantly white and in some hard places. And so, yeah, man, thank you, man. I hope our viewers will enjoy this as much as we did, man. Just talking, and
for sure,
man. Knowledge is power. And
it is.
However you want to spin it or say it, man, it is good to know. And so, thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Box Office Buddies. We hope to see you guys again soon.
Tap in.
Yes.